An unfamiliar bank statement addressed to my name, but routed to an account I never opened. I kept quiet, and then the envelope arrived, heavy, embossed with my family's old crest, my name Jor, cleanly across the front, inside a civil complaint, Damon Cross Vana Cross, alleging undue influence, emotional manipulation, financial misconduct. I read it 3 times before I felt anything at all. By noon, the story hit local news. Decorated officer accused of exploiting elderly parents for personal gain. They used my sternest military ID photo, one where I looked more like a threat than a daughter. I stopped answering calls. Some were curious, others careful, a few from people who once saluted me, but now weren't sure what to believe. For the first time in my life, I felt like a ghost in my own skin, not fallen, just erased. I'd fought foreign enemies, I'd tracked cyber threats across oceans, but nothing prepared me for being branded a villain by the people who used to send me birthday cards in active combat zones. Still, I didn't retaliate. I didn't hold a press conference or hire a PR team. In intelligence, you learn fast. The louder the noise, the easier it is to miss the real signal. So I waited and watched, because instinct told me this wasn't just a family power grab. It was something deeper, and I was going to find it. I didn't sleep much of that week. Not because of fear, at least not the kind that comes with headlines or lawsuits. This was the quieter kind, the type that creeps into your bones when something doesn't add up. I'd spent my career studying patterns, exposing invisible threats buried in systems people trusted, and now those same instincts told me Damien wasn't acting alone. He wasn't smart enough for this level of precision. So I started digging, not publicly, not in court, but in the dark, quiet way I'd been trained. Between the lines, beneath the noise, it began with a single email buried in the metadata of a financial notice forwarded to my parents' inbox, a transfer to a company called Veerstone Consulting. I'd never heard of it. A quick trace showed it was linked to another shell corporation in Delaware, common, easy to overlook, but the routing numbers told a different story. The funds passed through Curacao, then to a bank flagged years ago in a Department of Defense leak audit. That alone could have been coincidence, but then I checked the nonprofit Heather claimed to run, a veteran reintegration therapy fund. It sounded noble, even used my service photo on the website, but the patient list raised red flags. Too many names I recognized, soldiers I had deployed with. Some of them had died, others I knew were incapable of even signing a digital consent form. The whole thing was a facade. Heather's nonprofit was a siphon. They were using stolen identities, mostly veterans, to file for government assistance, then funneling the funds through Damien's companies. It wasn't just fraud, it was federal, and my parents' names were on every authorizing document. At first, I told myself they didn't know, that Damien had manipulated them, that Heather had lied. But the signatures were too perfect, too consistent, spread across too many months. They weren't coerced, they were complicit. I confronted my father first. In the garden, he was pruning the same rose bush he'd always claimed was too delicate for Northern Virginia weather. When I asked him why my name had been scrubbed from every legal record tied to the house, he said nothing for a long time. Then quietly he said, "You were gone too long." That was it. No anger, no denial, just a quiet indictment of absence, as if service were abandonment, as if sacrifice came with an expiration. Date, I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just turned and walked away. Later that night, I sat in the guest bedroom and reread every financial document I'd pulled. I traced signatures, timestamps, access logs. There were details only someone inside would know: deployment dates, veteran, medical files, archived clearance, status. They hadn't just turned on me. They'd used me, my record, my service, my silence, and I realized this wasn't a dispute over money. It was a war over identity, mine and those who couldn't fight back, and I was done letting them win it. They thought I'd stay buried in shame. Instead, I made a call. Her name was Lena Rohr, former NSA, now living off the grid in coastal Maine. We hadn't spoken in over 5 years. She picked up. After one ring, "You calling about blood or betrayal?" she asked. I didn't smile. "Both," I replied. We met at decommissioned ranger station 2 hours outside DC. Neutral ground, no reception, no power grid, no watchful neighbors, just the hiss of wind through brittle trees and the crunch of gravel under boots. I arrived first. Lena came next, carrying only a weathered backpack and a laptop older than her secrets. By dusk, the rest of the team had arrived. Mason Rivera, cyber forensic analyst, formerly with Pentagon Red Team, clean-cut, wired like caffeine itself, capable of tracing a stolen Bitcoin across 10 countries before lunch. Raj Patel, financial intelligence consultant, disgraced after exposing a money laundering ring inside a major defense contractor, brilliant, precise, and far more dangerous than he looked. Wes Drummond, psychops, GR Raison specialist, once described as the guy you send in when you can't afford a single emotional mistake. Each of them had walked away from careers where loyalty was transactional. But each of them owed me something, or, maybe more truthfully, they knew what it meant to be betrayed by your own. I laid out everything: Heather's therapy fund, with falsified veteran profiles, Damien's shell companies used to launder grants, the connection to Darian Solutions, a foreign intelligence proxy. What started as a family land grab had become a spiderweb of identity theft, espionage, and national breach risk. Mason leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "They used your name," he said quietly, "your service record, your deployment timing. That's how they authenticated half this data." "Yes," I said, "because no one questions a soldier who isn't home." They had filed claims during Windows when I was overseas, claims using my ID as a ghost trail, submitting mental health forms I never authorized, routing sensitive metadata through nonprofits they controlled, and, in at least 3 cases, veterans I had personally deployed with were listed as patients under Heather's fund, except 2 of them had been killed in action. Years before, Raj traced a payment chain from one of Heather's foundations to an overseas account, Curacao first, then Luxembourg, then quietly filtered into a consulting firm registered in Geneva. The name on the registry, Darian Solutions International. He turned the laptop toward me. "That's your link," he said. "That's espionage, Mariana." It wasn't just greed anymore. It was treason. For the next 7 days, we barely slept. We worked in rotating shifts, mapping financial nodes, decoding shell structures, and verifying access logs. Mason traced digital certificates used to spoof clearance, renewal forms, forms that could be used to gain access to restricted military systems. The full architecture of a quiet, deliberate data leak sat blinking on a screen in front of me, and at the center of it all, my name. They had built the entire system around my credibility. Heather's smile, Damien's silence, my parents' signatures. It all came rushing back like static, turning into clarity, and I knew then. This wasn't about recovery, it was about surgical removal. Mason handed me the flash drive. This is everything. Time-stamped, verified, cross-G'd. Against federal audit standards, it'll land like thunder. I nodded. I prepared one document, just one page, simple, clear, undeniable. It wasn't revenge, it was exposure. I pressed my uniform, polished my shoes, and waited because some people still mistake silence for weakness, and I was about to remind them what precision sounds like. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished floors, the kind of place where truths are bent and reputations bleed slow. I arrived early, dressed in full formal uniform, dark navy, pressed sharp service ribbons, aligned, my last name etched in gold. Above the heart they tried to erase. I didn't wear it for show, I wore it because it was mine. When I entered the courtroom, they were already seated. Damien sat behind the plaintiff's table, jaw set in smug certainty. Heather whispered something to him and smiled. My parents were in the second row. My mother clutched a crumpled tissue. My father's expression was the same one he wore the day I left for my first deployment, distant, unreadable. The lawyer they'd hired looked like glass. Sharp edges, cold brilliance. She painted me as a delusional veteran, detached from reality mentally, compromised by years of war. She said I had coerced my parents during moments of vulnerability, that I manipulated them, that I was dangerous. She had polish, precision, and performance. I had something else. When she finished, they called Heather to the stand. She spoke of deep concern, of how she'd tried to reach me, how she feared I was spiraling. She trembled in all the right places. Her voice cracked at scripted moments, and I remained still because I knew what came next. When it was my turn, I rose. I didn't look at Heather or Damien or my parents. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. I'm not here to defend my character. I'm here to clarify the record. I reached into my case and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This document contains verified federal evidence of financial misconduct, identity theft, and communication with flagged foreign actors. I ask that you read it before proceeding. He took it, and then everything changed. His brows furrowed, his lips pressed tight. He read the first paragraph, then again, then looked up, his face now longer neutral. Bafe, he said, close the doors. No one leaves this room. Gasps, chairs creaked. Damon's smirk faltered. Heather's fingers dug into her lap. My mother inhaled sharply, and then they came. Federal agents entered fast and silent. No raised voices, no drama. Just efficiency and consequence. Two approached Damien. One moved to Heather. A fourth handed the judge a folder and whispered something into his ear. He nodded slowly. The lead agent spoke calm and firm. Damon Cross, Heather Cross. You are being detained under suspicion of federal wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit espionage against the United States government. Heather collapsed in her chair. Damien stood stunned. Then Fro rose as handcuffs clicked behind him. My parents didn't move. I looked at them. No plea, no apology, just the same hollow silence they'd given me when I asked years ago why my birthday was forgotten. I turned back to the judge. With your permission, I said quietly, I'd like to request protective review for any veterans whose identities were compromised. He didn't hesitate. Granted. And just like that, it was done. No yelling, no revenge. Speech, just the truth and steel cold. Silence, I didn't speak to the press. I didn't defend myself. I didn't stand in front of a podium and give a statement. I didn't write an op-ed or post carefully worded thread about justice. Because I had nothing left to say. Let them run their headlines. Hero turned accuser. Colonel Cross breaks the family. That raised her. Courtroom chaos. Betrayal in uniform. The angles varied. But the narrative never did. They wanted spectacle. I had given them silence, and silence for once felt like armor. I watched it unfold from the quiet of my apartment, the same one I hadn't lived in full time since my last active mission. Curtains drawn, lights low. The only noise came from the kettle when it boiled too long. Some called me brave. Messages poured in from veterans, from widows, from sons and daughters who recognized something in my face. Maybe the weariness, maybe the quiet anger, maybe just the clarity of someone who had been forced to pick truth over comfort. A few emails simply said, "Thank you," one woman wrote. I thought I was alone in being erased. You reminded me I'm not, but not everyone was kind. I was accused of destroying my family for money, for revenge, for pride. One late-night host called me a cautionary tale of ego in uniform. I didn't flinch. I'd been called worse in war zones. The battlefield just looked different here. More makeup, fewer landmines, same collateral damage. The federal investigation moved fast. Damien and Heather were indicted on multiple counts: wire fraud, identity theft, abuse of federal veteran aid systems, and unauthorized data access. The espionage link through Darian Solutions was now under separate national security review, and my parents, they were never charged. Age, mental capacity, plausible deniability, they had all the shields people like them always seem to have. I was asked more than once if I wanted to press private charges. I said no, not because I forgave them, but because I refused to keep spending my life in rooms filled with people who'd already decided I was disposable. I'd served 27 years in institutions built on hierarchy and denial. I wouldn't build another one in my own name, so I moved forward quietly, precisely on my terms, with the settlement money from the civil countersuit. I founded the Atlas Directive, a quiet operation tucked behind an unlisted door in Alexandria, Virginia. No flashy sign, no big staff. Just 4 of us at first, all former military, all survivors of systems that didn't protect us. We specialized in digital defense for veterans, cyber monitoring for stolen identities, legal referrals for fraud victims, restoration of benefits, psychological support for those gaslighted by bureaucracy. But more than any service, we offered something most veterans never ask for out loud: recognition of what was taken from them, of who they used to be and who they still were. The first case we took on was a widow in Kansas. Someone had stolen her husband's identity 6 months after his funeral and rerouted his VA pension to a shell account in Florida. She tried to get help. No one listened until she found us. We got it back, every cent. Her voice shook when she called. "I know it's just money," she said, but it felt like someone erased him. "You brought him back." I hung up and sat at my desk in the dark for a long time because what she said wasn't